Louie T. Welcome to the Draft Prospects 101 series, your guide to some of the biggest and hottest names. 2024 NFL Draft, we're switching gears and now heading to the offensive line, specifically the offensive tackle position. And this is supposedly a very deep and rich draft class at the tackle position. We know tackles are one of those premium positions that usually goes relatively quick in the NFL draft. Much like quarterback, tackles usually get pushed up the board if the position is deep and fruitful. And so this class of tackles is supposed to meet that requirement. And one of the guys that is heading that class of tackles is none other than Notre Dame Fighting Irish left tackle Joe Alt. There's a lot to like here with Joe Alt, a number of things that he brings to the table, and why a lot of people are excited about the prospects of this guy being a high-level pick and a high-level starter for many years to come. And so let's jump into Joe Alt, what he brings to the table, and why he might make a top 10 selection for a team looking to bolster their offensive line. So you start with Joe Alt and his size, as you can see, at 6'8", which is a pretty big size. We'll talk more about that here in a second. 315, he was listed as 322 pounds as his playing weight, but to me, he's in more in that 315-pound range. Nice lean frame, not a lot of wasted fat there. And so there's so much to like with Joe Alt, man. And I think the first thing that jumps out at you is his height. Another thing that you realize with him very quickly is that he's just a junior. He's a baby, is Joe Alt. And so there's so many qualities here that are redeeming. 38 career games, 33 career starts, all at the left tackle position, all consecutively. So again, another thing to look out for there is this is a guy that is very durable, has the experience that you're looking for. We'll get into all of those things as we talk about some of his pros. Speaking of which, let's jump into his pros. And we start with being big, tall, and a long prospect. I mean, this is a guy, you're talking about 6'8". You're talking about a guy with probably going to measure out at 34-inch arms or so. And you're talking about a guy that is a big, massive man at 6'8", 320 roughly. So these are all things that you're looking for in your left tackle, the guy that's going to be the rock and foundation of your offensive line. He brings all of those qualities to the football field. And so he's an intriguing prospect just strictly off of his size alone. And again, you look for those things as one of those boxes that you check off when you're talking about offensive linemen, specifically tackles in the National Football League. The next pro is one that is very intriguing. He's very young. This guy's 20 years old, okay? And he'll be 20 years old his entire rookie season. He doesn't turn 21 until February next year. He just turned 20 in February, okay? So you're talking about a guy that's extremely young, a lot of football ahead of him, still moldable in that way because he's so young, yet still coming into the league as a polished product. You know what you're getting with Joe Alt day one when you throw him onto the field. Yeah, there's a few things he can clean up, but for the most part, this guy comes out of the packaging ready to go. No assembly required. You just turn him loose, and this guy's going to probably end up being a Pro Bowl, if not all-pro tackle for you for many years to come. The next pro is one that I highlighted in red, and when I highlighted in red as a pro, it's usually your superpower, right? He's got two of them. We'll discuss the first of which I believe is he's extremely fundamentally sound. I mean, when you talk about hand placement, when you talk about his feet, when you talk about his ability to reset his hands, these are all traits that sometimes go under the radar when you're talking about tackles in particular, especially the ability to place your hands. So many tackles get in trouble because their hands are too wide or their hands are too high and you end up getting a hands to the face penalty, or you get holding because your hands are so wide outside of the frame. And next thing you know, you get caught with your hand in the cookie jar. Offensive linemen hold on just about every single play, but where your hands are so vital to whether you get caught and called for holding or not. He does a great job with his hand placement. he's like a machine in that regard. It seems like his hands are placed in the right spot almost every single time. Does a great job of resetting his hands and switching up his punches and things of that nature, even going as far as to switching up the cadence of his getting off the snap, right? Like as an edge rusher, there are things that you try to look for as tells, things that you can take advantage of. Sometimes how a tackle gets off the football, that's something that they do on every single snap. You're able to time that up. You're able to then use that against them. He's one of those guys that even switches that up, the cadence of getting off the ball. So he's very fundamentally sound, man. I mean, and it makes sense coming from the background that he comes from. We'll highlight that a little bit later on as well. Next pro, generates movement on double teams and washdowns. Does a tremendous job on those double teams of generating movement in the run game. I love when he's tasked with washing down that defensive end or that defensive tackle. He'll take that guy, move him down a gap or two, and create a massive cutback lane. We saw that a number of times where Estime was able to take advantage of that and some of the other backs at Notre Dame. And so he does a really good job in creating movement off of double teams and washdowns. The next pro can get to the second level and has nimble enough feet to recover in pass pro. So one thing about Joe Alt is that he just doesn't get beat very often. You know, that thing, when I talk about extremely fundamentally sound, those fundamentals show up on a snap in, snap out basis, and it allows him to win most reps. But even when he doesn't win the rep and a guy's able to get by him initially and win the early portion of the rep, he's able to then recover. His feet are good enough. The length is good enough to then ride that edge rusher around the pocket, keep the integrity of the pocket intact, and give the quarterback an opportunity to step up and deliver the football. But in saying that, he can also get to the second level. His feet are nimble enough to get to the second level and be a productive blocker on the second level when he can then attach to that second level defender. He's, again, athletic enough to do that. We'll talk more about his athleticism a little bit later on, but he is athletic enough to get to the second level and be a force there when he is able to engage. Next pro is another one of his superpowers to me, and it's experience and durability. And for me, with college offensive linemen in particular, these two kind of go hand in hand. You want the experience, but you also want it to come in succession. You want it to show durability. You don't want a guy that's in and out of the lineup. You want a guy that every week, week in, week out, you know you can count on that guy to lace him up, strap on the helmet, and be available for you. The best ability is availability, as we know in the NFL. And this is a guy that has 38 career games, 33 of them starts consecutively from his true freshman season, where he started the final 8 games, then started all 13 games the following year, and then started the first 12 games of his junior season before opting out of that final game, the bowl game, to start preparing for the NFL draft. So this is a guy, 33 consecutive starts, all at the tackle position, can play both sides, left or right. You would see them interchange him from right to left side of the offensive line in game, in series. So this is a guy that offers you experience as a 3-year starter, offers you durability, offers you the things that you're looking for a guy that you can bank on at the left tackle position. And then finally, his last pro is bloodlines. This is a guy whose dad was a hell of a left tackle in the NFL, hell of an offensive lineman in the NFL, in John Alt for the Kansas City Chiefs. His brother plays in the NHL. So I think part of why he's so technically sound, so fundamentally sound, is because his dad played in the NFL. And you always wonder, how much do ex-professional athletes pour into their children? And you can usually tell very quickly by what type of a player they are, how much their father poured into them in showing them the nuances of the game and how to become a player that can make it to the highest of levels. And clearly his dad has poured into him. I think that's part of the reason why you see such great fundamentals from Joe Alt at such a very young, ripe age. Okay, so these are all pros that you get with Joe Alt. As we move on to some of the things that may push him down the board a little bit, not too far. Obviously, I think he'll be the first tackle to hear his name called in this upcoming draft, but why he might not go a little bit higher, Here are some of the reasons why. First things first, he's not an elite athlete, okay? He's a good enough athlete, but if you want to be a guy considered for the number 1, number 2, number 3 overall pick in the draft, you better be an elite athlete. He is not that, okay? While he can get to that second level, while he can get anywhere you need him to get to on the field, he's not a great athlete, and you see that on tape, right? So you get to the next con, not great at second level seek and destroy. And I think it kind of goes hand in hand with something else that I want to mention. I think it bears mentioning. I don't want to belabor this point because I don't think it's as big of a deal. But I like my offensive lineman a little ornery, a little nasty, a little rough around the edges, a guy that sometimes you got to reel in. Joe Alt is a very level-headed individual. You're not going to really rattle his cage at all. He's not going to show a ton of emotion. He's going to do his job and then move on to the next snap. There is something to be said for that. But I also like my offensive linemen just a little bit nasty. I call them nasty boys, right? Nasty boys. I want a nasty boy. He's not really a nasty boy, right? And I think the seek and destroy at the second level is less to do with being a nasty boy and more to do with him athletically being able to move laterally. When a guy darts out in front of him, is he able to change directions and stay in front of him and put a body on him? Or is that guy going to be able to elude his block and get in on the play? And a lot of times he's not able to put the brakes on. He's a big man, as I mentioned already. He's a big guy. So it's not easy for him to put the brakes on, redirect, change directions, and make that block at the second level. So a lot of times when he's able to be effective at the second level, he's either catching a second level defender off guard, or that second level defender is willing to engage. If you're looking to avoid, I think you can avoid Joe Alt at the second level if you are a defender. Taller frame offers bull rush opportunities. So he's 6'8". That's a good thing. You want tall, long, active tackles. But at the same time, if you're going to be that tall, you better be able to bend. Sometimes he struggles with that bending aspect, which then leads to him with the next con. And I guess we can go ahead and go to that. It's highlighted in red. So that's me telling you that I think this is his biggest deficiency at this current juncture. He will get caught lunging and overextending. And some of that has to just do with the fact that he's 6'8". And sometimes he doesn't bend at the knees. He bends at the waist. He doesn't move his feet sometimes. They get stuck. And so he gets caught lunging at the defender. And oftentimes where you'll see this really play the biggest factor is when guys who have a lower center of gravity get up under his pads, they're able to bull rush him. He will anchor down sometimes at the very end of the rep. And by that point, he's already in the quarterback's lap. That's uncomfortable for some quarterbacks. Some quarterbacks are able to stand in there and still deliver the football. Others feel that pressure of the pocket kind of collapsing and closing in on them, and they get out of there. Just depends on who the quarterback that you're playing with is and how he's able to feel the pocket and still be able to operate. A lot of times you'll see him get pushed back, and he will be in the lap of his quarterback. And he may anchor down, but it'll be at the very last second. And so I think one of the things he'll have to work to be better at, one, is not being too antsy to get his hands. Let that edge rusher travel a little bit more before you engage and then really get up into his chest. But in doing that, sometimes you allow that defensive player to then have an advantage of getting into your body first. As an offensive lineman, you are taught to strike first. You want to be the one to initiate contact, not that guy off balance and keep him at bay. But sometimes when you're over aggressive and you're too willing to engage, you then find yourself lunging, and you get that with Joe Alt. And so there's a little bit of that overextending, a little bit of that lunging, a little bit of him getting pushed back and bull rushed a little bit more than you would like him to. You rarely see him just get driven back, like literally picked up off of his feet and dump truck back into the lap of the quarterback. But you do see him give ground. And sometimes it's a little bit more than you probably are comfortable with. And so that's something I think he could clean up at the next level. And I think he will. Again, he's such a young puppy. He's got so much room for growth, yet he's so polished already. So there's so many things to like about Joe Alt. And I think there are going to be a lot of teams really, really interested in getting their hands on this prospect. You get to his comp, and I'm a Notre Dame Fighting Irish fan, and I hate doing this because I talk about this every year in evaluating and how this is sort of a lazy thing to do. But in saying that, sometimes it's the right thing to do as well. It is the easy thing to do because generally universities they recruit the same type of athlete, the same type of player profile. So Notre Dame has been an offensive line factory for what seems like a decade or so. You can go to Notre Dame and get you a good interior offensive lineman. You can go to Notre Dame and get you a tackle, and they all look the same, right? The interior guys are huge. They're massive. They're space eaters. They're physical. Some are athletic. Most aren't. And then the tackles, they're tall, they're lean, they're long. They're fundamentally sound, not the best athletes. They all kind of look the same, right? And generally, that's what you get when you scout a program over the life of that program. Generally, they recruit the same type of guys. The best, to me, comp for Joe Alt is Mike McGlinchey. He looks just like Mike McGlinchey. He's just better than Mike McGlinchey. I'll say this, Joe Alt is the best tackle to come out of Notre Dame since Mike McGlinchey, and probably it's been a while since they produced a tackle of this high caliber. But I won't lie to you, he's not the best offensive lineman to me coming out of Notre Dame. I think he's the third best offensive lineman we've seen come out of Notre Dame in the last decade. But I'd put Quentin Nelson and I'd put Zach Martin ahead of him. I think Zach Martin was the best prospect coming out of Notre Dame probably in the last decade. And I think Quentin Nelson came out with a lot of fanfare, and he was so physical, and you could see it on tape, and he was athletic, and there was so much to like with Big Q. But Alt, I think, is third behind those two, right? So while he's an elite prospect, I don't think, and I'll just say this, I don't think he's worth taking over any of the top three quarterbacks. I'll just say that. So I'll make that abundantly clear. But I think his round projection, he's a top 10 pick, and he will go in the top 10 of this draft. I don't think he'll go in the top 5, but I do think he'll go in the top 10, probably in the top 7 picks or so. I don't see Joe Alt making it out of the top 10 of this draft. So that's going to do it for Joe Alt and his Draft Prospects 101 series breakdown. Come back for more breakdowns as we continue to go through the offensive line, specifically the offensive tackle position, and knock down some of these high-level offensive tackles that we think will hear their name called in either day 1 or early stages of day number 2. Most of these guys will probably hear their names called in day number 1. Either way, we'll break them down here on the Draft Prospects 101 series. Until next time, I'm your man Louie T signing off. You guys have a good one. Take care.